I never expected the person who would gut me from the inside out to be the man who kissed me goodnight for 6 years. My husband had this way of making everything sound reasonable even when it wasn't. He'd smile that slow southern smile, tilt his head like he was genuinely confused by my overreactions, and somehow I'd end up apologizing for noticing things that were right in front of my face. That was his real talent, not the job, not the charm he showed our friends, but the way he could make me doubt my own memory while looking me dead in the eye. My name is Ruby Hayes. I'm 29 years old, and I work as the communications director for a small but scrappy nonprofit in Birmingham that helps kids aging out of foster care find stable housing and jobs. It's not glamorous, but I'm good at it. I know how to write a grant that actually gets funded and how to tell a story that makes donors open their wallets without feeling manipulated. I liked my life. Or at least I thought I did until the afternoon the bank app on my phone started screaming at me. I was sitting at my desk, half listening to a Zoom call about an upcoming fundraising gala when the notification popped up. Large transfer from our joint savings, $12,000, gone to an account I didn't recognize. My first thought was fraud. My second thought was that my husband must have finally done something with that investment opportunity he'd been vaguely mentioning for weeks. He'd been cagey about it, which wasn't like him. Usually he loved telling me every detail of every deal he was working on at the car dealership where he managed the sales floor. I texted him right there in the middle of the meeting. "Did you move money out of savings today?" "The bank just flagged it." He replied almost instantly like he'd been waiting for the question. "Relax, babe. It's for something good. I'll explain when you get home. Don't make a thing out of it." That "don't make a thing out of it" was his favorite phrase when he wanted me to shut up without having to say it outright. I stared at the screen until my boss asked if I was still on the call. I mumbled something about a family emergency and logged off early. The drive home from the office felt longer than usual. Birmingham traffic was its normal, chaotic self, but inside my car, everything was too quiet. I kept replaying the last few months in my head, my husband coming home later than usual, the sudden business trips to Atlanta that never quite added up, the way my younger sister Ember had started showing up at our house more often, always with some excuse about needing advice on her new online boutique. Ember was 26, still figuring herself out, and my husband had always been weirdly patient with her. He'd listened to her complain about her dead-end job and her latest bad boyfriend like he was some kind of wise older brother. I used to think it was sweet. Now the memory made my stomach twist. When I pulled into our driveway in the quiet Homewood neighborhood we'd chosen because it felt safe and walkable, Ember's little silver Honda was already parked behind my husband's truck. Of course it was. She'd been helping him with some paperwork a lot lately. I sat in my car for a full minute with the engine off, trying to decide whether I was being paranoid or finally paying attention. I walked in through the side door like always. The house smelled like the lemon cleaner my husband insisted on using, even though I hated the fake citrus scent. Voices drifted from the kitchen. My husband's low laugh, and then Ember's higher one, the kind she used when she wanted to sound cute. I stopped in the hallway and listened. She'll lose it when she finds out," Ember was saying. "You know how she gets. Everything's always a crisis with her." My husband answered, voice smooth. "Don't worry about Ruby. I've got her handled. She trusts me too much to push hard. Just keep playing the supportive sister, and we're golden." I didn't move. Couldn't. The words landed like cold water down my back. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, and hit record. Then I stepped into the kitchen. They both looked up. My husband's face shifted instantly into that concerned husband expression he wore so well. Ember's eyes went wide for half a second before she pasted on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, you're home early," my husband said, standing up from the table like nothing was wrong. "Everything okay at work?" I held up my phone so they could see the bank alert still on the screen. $12,000. Where did it go? He glanced at Ember, then back at me. The smile stayed, but something behind it tightened. I told you not to make a thing out of it. It's an investment. Something that's going to help all of us in the long run. An investment in what I asked. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Ember jumped in before he could answer. Ruby, you're doing that thing again. Getting all worked up over nothing. Knox is trying to build something for your future, and you're acting like he's stealing from you. I turned to look at her. Really look. She was wearing one of my old sweaters, the soft gray one I'd left at our parents' house last Christmas. It hung off her shoulder in that casual way that suddenly felt deliberate. Ember? I said slowly, why are you wearing my sweater? She touched the sleeve like she'd forgotten it was on her body. Oh, I borrowed it last time I was here. You said I could. I never said that. My husband stepped between us, hands up like he was calming two spooked horses. Babe, come on. This is ridiculous. You're exhausted from work. Let's just sit down and talk about the money like adults instead of turning this into some big dramatic scene. That was the moment something inside me cracked open. Not broke, cracked. Because I recognized the tone. It was the same one he used when I brought up how often he forgot to tell me about plans with his friends. The same one he used when I mentioned that Ember had been texting him at odd hours. The same one that always ended with me feeling like the problem. I pulled up the voice memo I'd just recorded and hit play. The kitchen went very still. My husband's face didn't change at first. Then the color drained out of it. Ember made a small, choked sound and reached for the phone like she could delete the evidence out of the air. Give me that, my husband said, voice low. I stepped back. Not a chance. He took a step toward me anyway, not threatening exactly. My husband never raised a hand, but close enough that I felt the shift in the room. Ember was crying now, real tears, or good acting I couldn't tell. You're recording us, she sobbed. In our own house, Ruby, what is wrong with you? Why are you always trying to destroy everything good? My husband put his arm around her shoulders, like he was protecting her from me. The sight of it made something bitter and sharp rise in my throat. Ember, I said, and my voice came out flat, almost gentle. How long has this been going on? She wouldn't meet my eyes. My husband answered for her. Nothing is going on, Ruby. You're twisting things because you're stressed. You've been working too much. You're paranoid. I've been telling you for months that you need to slow down, but you never listen. I looked at the two of them standing there together in my kitchen in my sweater and felt the floor tilt under me. Not because I didn't know. Some part of me had known for a while. The part that had started keeping mental notes of every late night and every vague explanation. The part I had been ignoring because believing it would mean my entire life was a lie I'd been telling myself. I turned off the recording and slipped the phone into my back pocket. I'm going to Maya's, I said. Don't follow me, don't call me. And if either of you touches another dollar of that money, I'll make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of man you are. My husband's laugh was short and ugly. Go ahead, run to your friend. She'll just tell you the same thing I'm telling you. You're overreacting. You always do. Ember didn't say anything. She just stared at the floor, like if she stayed still long enough, I might disappear. I walked out without looking back. My hands were shaking so hard, I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove 3 blocks before I had to pull over because the tears came fast and hot, and I couldn't see the road. I sat there in the car, with the hazards on sobbing so hard my chest hurt, while the afternoon light turned golden over the Birmingham streets, like nothing in the world had just ended. When I could breathe again, I called Maya. She answered on the first ring. Ruby. What's wrong? I told her everything in one long, broken rush. The money, the recording, the sweater, the way they'd looked at each other. like I was the intruder in my own house. Maya didn't interrupt. She just listened the way she always did, steady and quiet, until I ran out of words. "Okay," she said finally. "Come over. I'm making coffee, and I'm not letting you drive anywhere else tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." I wiped my face on the sleeve of my work blouse and started the car again. As I pulled back onto the road, my phone buzzed with a text from my husband. "Don't do anything stupid. We can fix this if you just calm down." I didn't answer. I drove to Maya's little bungalow on the other side of Homewood with the radio off and my hands locked on the wheel. The whole way there, I kept hearing my husband's voice in my head, smooth and reasonable, telling me I was the one who was broken. For the first time in 6 years of marriage, I was starting to wonder if he was right. I pulled into Maya's driveway just as the last of the afternoon light was sliding off the oak trees in her quiet Homewood yard. She was already on the porch, arms crossed, waiting like she'd known I was coming for hours. One look at my face, and she didn't ask questions. She just took the keys out of my hand, steered me inside, and put a mug of coffee in front of me that I didn't remember asking for. "Start from the beginning," she said, sitting across from me at her kitchen table. "And don't skip the parts that make you sound crazy. Those are usually the important ones." I told her everything again, slower this time. The bank alert, the recording, the sweater that used to be mine. The way my husband had looked at me like I was the one who'd broken something sacred. Maya listened without interrupting, only nodding when I got to the part where Ember cried like she was the victim. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my wrist once hard. "Okay," she said. "First thing tomorrow, we're calling the bank and freezing everything you can freeze. Second thing, we're finding you a lawyer who isn't going to let that man walk all over you. And third—" She paused, choosing her words. "You're not going back there tonight. Or tomorrow. Not until you decide what you actually want." I laughed, but it came out bitter and thin. What I wanted a marriage that didn't involve my little sister wearing my clothes while my husband moved money behind my back. Apparently, that was too much to ask. Maya didn't smile. She just poured more coffee. "Then we start with what you won't accept anymore." The next 3 days blurred together in a way that still makes my chest tight when I think about them. I stayed on Maya's pull-out couch, surrounded by her collection of thrift store art and the smell of the rosemary plant she kept on the windowsill. I called the bank from her kitchen and spent 40 minutes on hold before someone finally agreed to put a temporary freeze on the joint accounts. The woman on the other end sounded bored until I mentioned the word unauthorized transfer. Then her voice sharpened. My husband texted me constantly. The messages started reasonable and got meaner the longer I didn't answer. "We need to talk like adults. You're scaring Ember. She thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. This is exactly why I didn't tell you about the money. I knew you'd react like this. Come home. We can work this out. Don't throw away 6 years over nothing." I read them out loud to Maya one night while we sat on her back steps drinking cheap wine from her fridge. She made a face like she'd bitten into something sour. "Don't throw away 6 years over nothing," she repeated. "That's cute. Like the nothing wasn't him and your sister planning how to handle you." I didn't answer the text. Instead, I started a folder on my phone called Evidence and dropped every screenshot, every bank notification, every voice memo into it. It felt pathetic and necessary at the same time. Like if I could just collect enough proof, someone would have to believe me. The problem was, I wasn't sure who that someone was supposed to be anymore. On the 4th day, I made the mistake of calling my parents. I didn't tell them everything, just that my husband and I were having problems, and I was staying with Maya for a while. My mother's voice went tight in that familiar way it always did when family trouble came up. "Ruby, marriage is work," she said. "You can't just run off to your friend's house every time things get hard. Your sister called me crying yesterday. She said you accused her of something awful. Knox is worried about you. He thinks the stress at your job is getting to you again." Again. Like there had been a first time, like my husband hadn't been the one planting that story in the first place. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. When I told Maya what my mother had said, she just shook her head. "He's already working the narrative," she said, "making sure everyone thinks you're the unstable one." Classic move. That was the day I decided to try mediation. Not because I thought it would save anything, but because I wanted a record. I wanted someone neutral to see what was happening before my husband could rewrite the entire story. Maya helped me find Russell Kim, a family mediator who had a reputation for being blunt and fair. I called his office the same afternoon and got an appointment for the following Monday. My husband agreed to the mediation faster than I expected. Too fast. When I walked into Russell's small office on the south side of Birmingham that morning, my husband was already there with Ember sitting beside him like she belonged at the table. She was wearing another one of my old sweaters. I almost laughed. It was so obvious it was almost insulting. Russell Kim was in his 50s, calm with the kind of face that had seen every version of married people lying to each other. He introduced himself, laid out the ground rules, and asked why we were there. "I want to separate our finances cleanly," I said before my husband could speak. "And I want an agreement that he stops contacting me except through lawyers if we decide to go further." My husband leaned back in his chair and gave Russell the same easy smile he used on customers at the dealership. Ruby's been under a lot of pressure at work. She's been imagining things that aren't there. I just want her to come home so we can work on our marriage like normal people. Ember reached over and put her hand on his arm. "She's always been like this," she said softly, like she was explaining a sad but well-known fact. Dramatic, suspicious. She accused me of the most horrible thing just because Knox and I are close. We've always been close. Ruby's the one who made it weird. Russell looked at me. I could see him trying to read the room. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo, and played the recording from the kitchen. The silence after it ended was thick. My husband's smile didn't move, but the muscle in his jaw jumped once. Ember's eyes filled with tears again, real ones this time, I thought. "That was taken out of context," my husband said finally. "Ruby edited it. She's been doing that kind of thing lately, twisting conversations." Russell turned to him. "Mr. Hayes, I've been doing this a long time. That recording is pretty clear. Would you like to explain what you meant by 'I've got her handled' and 'keep playing the supportive sister'?" My husband looked at me then, and for the first time, the mask slipped. Not all the way, just enough for me to see the cold calculation underneath. "You're really going to do this?" he asked, voice low. "You're going to drag your own sister through the mud in front of a stranger because you can't handle that she and I actually get along? That's pathetic, Ruby. Even for you." Ember started crying harder. "I can't believe you're doing this to us. After everything Knox has done for you. After Mom and Dad, I stood up. My legs felt unsteady, but my voice didn't shake. I'm done here." Russell didn't try to stop me. He just looked at my husband and Ember with something that might have been pity or might have been disgust. I couldn't tell. I walked out of the office and into the humid Birmingham morning without looking back. Maya was waiting in her car in the parking lot like we'd planned. She took one look at my face and didn't ask how it went. She just started driving. We were halfway back to her house when my phone rang. It was my mother. I almost didn't answer, but some stupid, stubborn part of me still wanted to believe she might listen. "Ruby," my mother said the second I picked up, "what on earth did you do? Knox just called us. He said the mediation was a disaster and you attacked him and Ember in front of some mediator. He's worried you're going to do something drastic. He said you've been having panic attacks again." I closed my eyes. The sarcasm rose up in me like bile, sharp and automatic. "Did he also mention that he's been sleeping with Ember and moving our money around without telling me?" Or did he leave that part out? There was a long pause. When my mother spoke again, her voice was careful. "Honey, I think you need to talk to someone, a professional. Knox said you've been under a lot of stress and maybe imagining things. He's willing to pay for therapy if you'll just come home and try." I hung up without answering. Maya glanced over at me from the driver's seat. "You okay?" she asked. I laughed once short and ugly. "My husband just told my parents I'm crazy and offered to pay for therapy like he's the hero in this story. My sister is sitting there in my clothes crying about how I'm destroying the family, and my own mother believes him." I stared out the window at the passing buildings. I think I'm finally starting to understand how this ends. Maya didn't say anything for a minute. Then she reached over and turned the radio on low, some old country song about leaving and not looking back. That night, I sat on her couch with my laptop open and started writing everything down. Not just the facts, the dates, the transfers, the recording, but the way it felt. The slow, steady way my husband had made me smaller over the years. The way my sister had smiled at me while taking pieces of my life. The way everyone around us had nodded along because it was easier than asking hard questions. I didn't cry. I was past crying. What I felt instead was something colder and clearer. Like the last bit of fog had burned off, and I could finally see the road in front of me, even if it was empty. My phone buzzed with another text from my husband. I didn't open it. I already knew what it would say. More reasonable words, more concern, more poison dressed up as care. I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and lay down on Maya's pull-out couch in the dark. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was falling apart. I felt like I was finally deciding which pieces I was willing to lose. And I was starting to understand that the answer might be almost all of them. I stayed on Maya's couch for another week while my lawyer, a sharp woman named Lydia Torres, who Maya had found through a friend, put together the separation paperwork. Every document I signed felt like cutting a rope I hadn't realized was wrapped around my throat. My husband kept texting, then calling, then showing up at Maya's door at odd hours until she threatened to call the police. He switched tactics after that. The messages turned sweet again, full of, "I miss you, and we can fix this if you just come home and stop listening to people who don't have our best interests at heart." I stopped reading them after the third one. The mediation record from Russell Kim became the backbone of everything. He had written a short, blunt summary, noting that my husband had refused to address the recording, and that my sister had participated in what appeared to be coordinated pressure. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was something official. Something that couldn't be waved away as Ruby being dramatic. On a Tuesday morning in late spring, Lydia served the separation papers at my husband's dealership. She told me later that he had tried to charm her at first, then turned cold when she wouldn't engage. Ember wasn't there, but according to Lydia, he kept saying, "My wife's sister can confirm," like that was supposed to mean something. It didn't. 2 days later, they showed up at Maya's house. It was early evening. Maya and I were sitting at her kitchen table going over my new budget when the knock came sharp, impatient. I knew it was him before I opened the door. He never knocked like a normal person. He knocked like he already owned whatever was on the other side. My husband stood on the porch with Ember half a step behind him. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just stopped shrinking myself to make room for her. He was holding a manila folder like it was a peace offering. "We need to talk," he said. No smile this time. Inside. Maya appeared at my shoulder. "This is my house. You can talk out here or not at all." He ignored her and looked straight at me. "Ruby, you're making this harder than it has to be. I brought the paperwork to sign so we can put this behind us. You come home, we go to counseling like normal people, and we don't have to drag lawyers into every little thing." I stayed in the doorway. "You brought my sister to negotiate our marriage?" Ember flinched, but didn't step back. "I'm here because someone has to be the adult." You're acting like a child who didn't get her way. The old sarcasm rose up in me, automatic and cutting. That's funny. I thought the adult thing was not sleeping with your sister-in-law while moving joint money into secret accounts. But maybe I missed that chapter in the marriage handbook? My husband's face darkened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You want to do this out here? Fine. You recorded a private conversation without consent. That's illegal in some places. You're harassing me at work. You're telling people lies that could cost me my job. If you don't drop this and come home, I will make sure everyone knows you had a complete breakdown and I had to protect myself and your sister from your paranoia. Amber nodded like she was agreeing with a pastor. Mom and Dad are worried sick. They think you need help. If you keep this up, they're going to stop trying. I felt something shift inside my chest, not a crack this time, but a clean break. The last thread I had been holding onto the stupid, stubborn hope that my family would eventually see what was happening snapped. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and started recording again right there on the porch. Say that again, I told him. The part about protecting yourself and my sister from my paranoia. I want to make sure I get it right for the lawyer. He stared at the phone. For a second, I thought he might lunge for it. Instead, he laughed, short, ugly, the sound of a man who had finally run out of charm. You think you're so smart, he said. You think recording people makes you right. You've always been like this. Cold, calculating. I tried for years to make you warmer, to make you normal, and you just got more suspicious. Ember was the only one who understood how exhausting you are. Ember made a small sound like she wanted to protest, but couldn't quite get the words out. I kept the phone steady. How long were you sleeping with my husband before you decided I was the problem? She looked at him. He didn't look back. 6 months, she whispered. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. He said you two were basically roommates anyway? He said you didn't even notice him anymore. The words landed, but they didn't destroy me the way they would have 2 weeks earlier. I had already done most of the grieving in private on Maya's couch, while I built the folder on my phone. What I felt now was something colder and cleaner. My husband tried one last time. Ruby, if you sign the papers I brought and drop the separation, I'll make sure you get the car and half the savings we have left. We can tell people it was mutual. No one has to know about any of this. I turned the phone off and slipped it back into my pocket. Get off Maya's porch, I said. Both of you. If you come back here again, I will call the police and file for a protective order. And if either of you ever tries to contact my parents or anyone else in my life with your version of events, I will send every recording, every bank statement, and Russell Kim's mediation summary to every person you know, including your boss. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time since I had known him, my husband had nothing left to say that sounded reasonable. Ember started crying again, but it was different this time, quieter, like she finally understood she had chosen the wrong side and there was no going back. She turned and walked to the car without looking at me. My husband followed a second later. He didn't slam the door. He just got in and drove away, like he was already late for something more important. I stood on the porch until their taillights disappeared around the corner. Then my knees gave out. Maya caught me before I hit the ground. She half carried me inside and sat me on the couch, while I shook so hard I thought my teeth might break. The sound that came out of me wasn't crying at first. It was something rawer than noise of 6 years of pretending I was fine, finally collapsing all at once. I sobbed until my throat hurt and my eyes swelled shut until there was nothing left but the empty ringing quiet afterward. Maya didn't tell me it would be okay. She just sat beside me with a box of tissues and let me fall apart in her living room, like that was a completely normal thing to do on a Tuesday night. When I could finally speak, my voice was hoarse. I think I just lost my entire family. You lost the people who were pretending to be your family, she said. There's a difference. The next month moved in pieces. I found a small apartment near my office, one bedroom, creaky floors, a balcony that overlooked a parking lot instead of a yard. It was nothing like the house in Homewood, but it was mine. I took only what I had bought myself or what the lawyer could prove was mine. My husband fought the division of the savings account until Lydia threatened to subpoena his dealership records. He backed down after that. I ended up with enough to cover first and last month's rent and a small emergency fund. Not a victory, just enough to start. My parents called once after the porch confrontation. My mother asked if I was done being difficult. I told her I was done being lied to and hung up. They haven't called since. I don't expect them to. Ember sent one long, rambling text 2 weeks later. She said she was sorry that she had been confused, that my husband had made her believe I didn't love him anymore. She asked if we could talk. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't hurt both of us more than the silence already did. My husband's boss found out about the affair, and the questionable money moves through an anonymous email that contained just enough of the bank statements and the mediation summary to raise questions. He didn't get fired, but he was quietly moved off the sales floor and into a back office role with less commission. The charming guy image he had spent years building took a hit he couldn't quite recover from. I didn't feel triumphant when I heard. I just felt tired. I started seeing a therapist Maya recommended, a woman who didn't flinch when I said I still sometimes missed the version of my husband I had invented in my head. We talked about boundaries and grief and how to tell the difference between loneliness and peace. Some days I could. Some days I sat on my new balcony with a cup of coffee and cried because the quiet felt too big. Maya came over every Sunday with groceries and bad reality TV. We didn't talk about my husband or my sister much anymore. We talked about work and books and whether I should get a cat. Normal things, safe things. 3 months after I left the house in Homewood, I signed the final separation papers in Lydia's office. It wasn't a divorce yet. Alabama required time, but it was close enough. When I walked out of the building, the afternoon sun was hitting the Birmingham skyline in that soft way it does in early summer. I stood on the sidewalk for a long minute and just breathed. My phone buzzed. A text from my husband, the first in weeks. "I hope you're happy. You destroyed everything." I didn't answer. I deleted the message, put the phone back in my bag, and walked to my car. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself or soften the truth so someone else could swallow it. That night, I sat on my balcony with Maya. We drank cheap sparkling water out of real glasses because she said we were celebrating. The city lights flickered below us. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew. "I keep waiting to feel like I won," I said quietly. Maya looked over at me. "Winning isn't the point anymore, is it?" I thought about it. About the recordings I still had but would probably never use. About the empty spaces where my sister and my parents used to be. About the small apartment that was finally truly mine. "No," I said. "It's not." I took a sip of the water and let the carbonation sting my tongue. The grief was still there, it probably always would be, but it didn't own me the way it had on Maya's couch. It was just something I carried now, like a scar, that had finally stopped bleeding. I had chosen myself. Not because it felt good. Not because it was easy. But because staying would have cost me whatever was left of the person I used to be before I learned how to make myself smaller for other people. Detachment didn't feel like freedom at first. It felt like loss. But somewhere in the quiet, in the space I had finally carved out for myself, I could breathe again. And that was enough to keep going. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to walk away from people you once trusted with your whole heart just to keep the pieces of yourself that were left, I'd really like to know what you would have done in my place. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.